Okay, what is inclusion?
Inclusion is keeping everyone together.
So I think inclusion is making an effort to include everybody, regardless of identity and any other factors. Just making a conscious effort to not ever exclude anybody.
Um, it's when everybody is involved, I guess. Yeah.
I think that inclusion is just the ability to have everyone have the same opportunities and given the same chances.
Like inclusion is like accepting everyone regardless of like differences they may or may not have, and accepting everyone like for who they are.
I would say inclusion is kind of creating a welcoming environment for everyone, making sure that everyone feels reasonably safe and like they can interact with others in their community.
I think inclusion, especially in the classroom, is making it so that everybody has the resources in order to achieve the goal that's at hand or the task that's at hand.
Inclusion is not looking at someone for their outward appearance, but their inward appearance, and wanting genuinely to know the opinions of that person.
Let's see how about this. I guess like not being a jerk to people. I guess treating everybody good. It's kind of an abstract concept, like not segregating people. That's an obvious one. I guess I don't know. Like, not everybody's gonna like everybody, but like, oh goodness, this is a lot of ums and a lot of likes. It's a hard question.
Inclusion is including people and accepting other people regardless of any differences that they have.
Inclusion is the idea that everyone is being heard and validated with different perspectives.
I think inclusion is creating an environment that's safe for everyone, and it makes sure that everyone is being heard and everyone is being treated the same, and is kind of just an equal environment.
What does inclusion mean in regards to students with special needs?
I would say it means ensuring that everyone has equal access to resources. So I'm thinking about design elements of buildings. I'm thinking about accommodations they might need for certain processes that people without disabilities take for granted. So just kind of making sure that everyone has equal access to those resources.
I feel like it's harder for them and everything, like, just because they're, I don't know. Can you start?
Delivering a positive message to those that are not as fortunate to have the mental capacity as a normal person, and just making sure life is as easy as possible for them.
I think that's making sure that there are accommodations for students with special needs, making sure that they're being listened to and their needs are being heard and they're being met, and so they're not just kept separately, but they're involved and integrated in our communities.
It means regardless of their special needs, you treat them the same that you would treat anyone else.
Sure. Inclusion for students with special needs means that students are able to have the accommodations and modifications to learn in an environment where they're still able to learn from their peers as well. In an inclusive classroom, students can be learning in a variety of ways. I think inclusion on a college campus means providing students those same accommodations and modifications, just on a totally different scale.
In regards to special needs, I think that inclusion means giving those students the same chances that other students may have, and just making sure that everyone has fair opportunities and can really carry out their abilities to whatever that applies.
I think it means that students with special needs need to feel like they're still integrated in a classroom, like with peers. Because whether or not they have special needs or not, they're still going to be out in the real world. So it's not going to change like their surroundings, but it needs to be like in a way that they can, so they still feel included in a regular classroom, even like, and people are still accepting of like whatever special differences that they have.
Students with special needs should have the same opportunities as everyone else.
So I think that would just be making sure that they're never left out. I guess really also inclusion shouldn't necessarily be like a conscious effort to include others, but more of just like making sure no one's ever excluded. Because I don't think that anybody should also feel like they're being included just because they're of some other sort of identity or background.
So students with special needs is actually really close to my heart. But I think that it's an interesting idea because a lot of times they're forgotten about in this regard. However, I think that it's important to make sure that we are having different initiatives for students with disabilities in regards to like educational processes and those kinds of things, and just keeping aware that not all disabilities are same.
Needs.
Well, you picked the perfect person for this interview. Let's see. My brother has high functioning autism. We're twins, so we both have autism and like high functioning Asperger's, whatever. The number one thing I can tell you is like we try to be normal all the time. And that's obviously not possible. And it leads you to a place of frustration and stuff. But really, we don't want to go around with a sign on our head saying, I have autism, or I have, I don't know, dyslexia, or some other, whatever disability it is, label on our heads. We just want to be treated fairly, equally, as normally as possible. I mean, we're going to need some help here and there, but we just want to, like, live. We don't want to be like baby through life, but we don't want to be like beat down with a truncheon either. Like we just want to do the same things everybody else does.
Yeah.
And the classroom, I mean, it's obviously going to be harder. It's going to take different forms. I don't have all the answers. But
Have you ever had a student with a special need in your classroom?
I have. In musical theater, we actually invited students with special needs to join our class and to be in musical productions with us.
I would say, I mean, not at Clemson University, but I would say...
In any grade.
In any grade? So yes, I definitely have. Just various special needs.
I actually think I have one in one of my classes this semester.
Really?
But I've never gotten to talk to her.
No, I don't think.
No, but I have worked with plenty of people who have special needs, and they prove to be very capable of doing the exact same job as people around them, even to a better extent.
Yes, I have. On rare occasions, it was a physical disability. But sometimes, I guess I don't like officially know, but I know that we had like note takers requested, so I knew that there were probably some invisible disabilities that existed there. So yes.
Yes, I in like second grade there was a girl named Mary who was blind in our class.
Yeah, I have had a student with a special need in my classroom. I actually have a student with a special need in my life. So my nephew is 14. He's dyslexic and has an emotional behavioral disability, so he's actually in an inclusion classroom.
What was the experience like for the student?
I would say sometimes it could be challenging. Different social activities were difficult, like with group work, and sometimes others were not as willing to work with this individual because maybe group work was a little harder with this individual. But I think that also kind of contributed to the fact that he experienced difficulty because others almost kind of felt that that barrier was already in place.
I've had really positive and like not so great experiences with kids in my classrooms. In like high school, I had a really good friend and she had Down syndrome, and she like went to like our regular classes and stuff like that. And she just had like one different class that she would go to. So she was like very high functioning. So she was just like a regular kid. Like I went over to her house and like played and stuff like that. And so I still consider her to be like one of my good friends now. And then I had like one friend who he had Asperger's, and so he like wasn't as high functioning, and so he had a difficult time like socializing with people. So I think that made it difficult for him.
Oh, everyone loved this guy. His name was Tommy, and we just like gave him high fives every day, helped him out. Just like always wanted him in our group.
Was he separated from your class ever, or was he always there?
I mean, like for like most assignments, but like there were some things.
Most assignments he was separated?
Not, I mean, like he would help out, but like he wouldn't like be doing the assignment. I mean, he was just in the class to like.
Well, I've had like different things where I've had probably someone a little bit further down on the spectrum than others. So other kids have had maybe just a teacher aide in the class, or other students have had where that teacher aide kind of just like helps them go along with their work, and then there's been other like chances where the student is totally dependent on that aide. So I think it really varies, but personally it didn't really affect me. There weren't really many distractions, so as a whole I think it benefited the student.
She has to have someone to take notes for, and so like I wouldn't really know what her experience is just because it's such a big class. But
she's in the class the whole time.
Yeah, I assume it's difficult.
My brother actually has he's on the autism spectrum, so I have a lot of experience with him and his learning and how he does in the classroom. So I think the schools that he was in tried to integrate him very well into the curriculum. However, there were different processes that he had to go through, like testing and meeting with his teachers to go over the content a little further in ways that he would understand. He had specialized tests that for different classes that went over ways that he learned best, he was very fortunate to have that resource.
I think it was challenging, especially in a theater setting, because a lot of things were physically demanding that they couldn't participate in, but I also think it was a really great creative environment for like an outlet for them, and something that before they weren't able to participate in, and something they always really wanted to do. So I think it was a great learning experience for them. Yeah, so during rehearsals they would be doing the same things, especially singing. That would be really easy for them to participate in, but with dances we would have very rigorous dances, and they were both wheelchair bound, so they weren't able to be in the center of the stage when we actually performed. They would have to be on the edge. So I would say that's the only time that they were isolated for their disabilities, because they physically weren't able to integrate, but they participated with hand movements and everything like that. So we did our best to kind of include them.
It was difficult for her, especially because a lot of the students, like in second grade, like they don't really understand, and so they would treat her differently and make fun of her and stuff like that. But she used to just kind of deal with it, so I think she was really strong.
I believe that would be really frustrating for that student, because I think for students without something hindering their ability to learn in like the traditional way, it would be more or less easy to follow along, keep up as it were. And I think for a student with something kind of, I would say, blocking them from learning in the traditional way, I can imagine that'd be really frustrating and disheartening.
Yeah.
I think for my nephew in the classroom, his experience is difficult. For him, I think like any 14-year-old, he wants to be what he believes is normal and what's perceived as normal. And I think for him, in a classroom, regardless of if it's in an inclusion classroom or not, he is aware of his modifications and adaptations, and he feels like the students in his class are too. So I think that that's difficult for him. In terms of students that I've worked with, I think it's hard. I think that those experiences for those students, you never, especially in your formative years, want to feel like another. So I think that for students with disabilities, it's an important balance for teachers to be able to incorporate those students into the classroom and make them feel as though their modifications and accommodations are a natural part of their day.
I think it was challenging to be around students that didn't understand, and so that would be mainly frustrating, and you could tell when they would get really frustrated with specific things, or if they weren't being treated well by other students, which would be really sad. Definitely frustrating. They were mostly separated from us, but sometimes they would be, it depended, like in English classes, they were usually integrated with us.
Well, my experience was pretty atypical for two reasons. One is, it's going to sound like jerk or whatever, like, I'm really smart. So that made a difference some. And therefore I never had any like learning difficulties or stuff. And secondly, I didn't know I had autism until I was in 8th grade, which is pretty late because my parents compared me to my identical twin brother who had autism. They found out in 2nd grade. But I'd say academically, I was fine. Like, I did a lot of stuff. I was really good in school, like salutatory and all that mess. Only thing is I get really stressed on tests, and so I'd have to have extra time to process it and stuff. But socially is where a lot of my problems came. Just a lot of anxiety, a lot of doubt. A lot of the problems you see in teenagers normally, but exacerbated more. And I think, I went to a public charter school, like 400 kids. So it's probably the best place I could have gone by far. I loved it. I didn't have a bad experience. I had a good experience. But I would definitely say socially is where at least I struggled more.
What was the experience like for others in the class having the student there?
Like I said, I don't think it really affected the rest of the class. I think it was just a good opportunity for those other students to be exposed to a different environment than they were previously. And I think that's definitely beneficial for the students' growth individually.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was like a learning experience for everyone at first, especially like they made a big deal. Like I remember like my middle school, like they made a really big deal about this girl, her name was Gabby, coming in, like she had Down syndrome and that she was like different and special, but like when she came to our class, like she was just like any other kid, like we didn't treat her any differently. So I think it was like a learning experience, like she's still a person, like it doesn't change like who you are.
I would say I'm probably more optimistic about it. I think that, and this might be like difficult to do, but I think that if instruction were adjusted to accommodate a variety of learning styles, I think everyone would ultimately benefit. So I think that it's not necessarily like if you like slow down, then everyone will suffer. I think that you just kind of change the way you approach it and use all kinds of different methods and media, and then everyone would benefit from that. Everyone who even has different just learning styles, much less a disability.
Definitely, my experience, actually I would say it was benefited positively.
I think it was beneficial, and I can say at least for me, I thought it was beneficial as a student. I'm specifically actually thinking about in marching band and band class. This student was in those classes, and he definitely helped me to realize like how I could better accommodate others. Since I was drum major and was kind of like a student leader within the bands, it was definitely making an effort to have him be, exactly like all of the other marching band students. Marching band is very much about like uniform like being uniform and making sure everybody looks the same on the field. So that was something that like we definitely worked on, and I think in the end like it turned out to be a really good experience.
I think it was a transition, and like Christina was saying, there is a stigma with students with special needs, and so I think it was kind of awkward at first because they didn't want to offend them because they knew they couldn't do the dances, and they didn't want to be like, can you do this? So it definitely, I think, was a learning experience for those students to kind of learn that you don't have to tiptoe around it, and that special needs is like a real thing, and that you can be very upfront about it and asking what they're comfortable with and what they want to do.
Well, people found her, like, they treated her differently, like I said, and I think they were just kind of ignorant to it, so they weren't really, I guess they were kind of scared of it almost. They didn't know how to act around her or anything like that, so like being a second grader, like you don't really understand things like that, but so yeah, I don't think they got it.
I think for me, when I was looking, when I was in my undergrad, I was looking a lot at IEPs, specifically how IEPs are created and what accommodations and modifications are put in place for students. And something that I thought was really interesting was that a lot of teachers were talking about the fact of, if I'm going to do an accommodation or a modification, why do I not just do it for the whole class? And what does that look like? So I think that sometimes it can be important to the other students that are in the class to learn a different style.
Students, people can be jerks. Some people good, some people bad, but teachers overall are pretty good.
So, as a matter of policy, do you think that students with special needs should be included in the regular classroom or separated into specialized classes?
I think that it should be a mixture of both. I think that all students can benefit from having the experience with special needs students, and I think that special needs students benefit from being in a regular classroom too. But there's always going to be certain aspects that students with special needs won't be able to gain from being in a normal classroom.
I think it would be best probably if they were completely integrated with non-disability students, because I think that's a really great learning experience, because in the real world you're not going to be separated because you have special needs, and so I think that's really cool. But also at the same time, I think it's good that they get special accommodations and they are treated and they get specific needs addressed. So I think at some points during the day it would be good if they were able to kind of separate off and be able to address those.
I think that maybe we could have a good, healthy mix of both. Like start them off in separate classes and then include them, just so that they have the specific attention that they need, and then they can get into the real world when they're prepared.
I think it really depends, because everyone has different capabilities. Like, even some students are in regular classes, some students are in more advanced classes. So I think depending on how quickly they can work, how easily it is for them to learn, they should be put into the specific classes.
I think in my ideal world, everyone would be together, and it would kind of be, again, that classroom where there's all kinds of different styles being catered to, different techniques being used. But I mean, I guess I would compromise and say that if that was like impossible in the near future, only if it would be like proven to help. You know what I mean? So I don't like the idea of it, but if it would be easier to provide specialized help rather than keep them like in an environment where they're not learning as good as they can, like I would rather the learning be enhanced, but I think that it ultimately would be better to change the traditional class environment.
I think it depends on like their ability and like level of comfort. So like if they feel like they want to be included in a regular classroom and they can still like keep up and like learn things and like get something out of the class as well, because ultimately like you're in a school to like socialize but also to learn. So as long as they're like learning what they need to learn.
This is a yes/no thing. The yes would be obviously, I got the allergies. If it's like me or my brother or something, like if they're not being a behavioral problem and they can generally keep up with the class and stuff, then yeah, like my brother and I shouldn't be segregated into different classes. I mean, he was in special ed in K-5, and then first grade they mainstreamed him out in second grade, and he needs some special help and stuff, but by and large he did pretty well. But I also know of cases where this can go wrong. Like my home county, Greenville County, abolished all self-contained classes, like all of them. And I'm not in elementary school, so I don't know how that goes. But what I've heard isn't good, and I can't imagine it to be good. I think it depends on the kids. Some kids.
I mean, I know from experience that it's not. Even if students are being separated into specialized classrooms, their needs are so vastly different than the other people that are in the classrooms with them. So my home district, where my nephew is a student, is extremely small. So essentially any student with a disability is put in the same classroom and has different needs. So at that point, I think that development for our students with disabilities is not only academic and intellectual development, but also social development. And I think that a lot of those important social skills are learned in the classroom with your peers. So I think that as a matter of policy, I think it's important to have students interacting with diverse groups of their peers, whether they're a student with disabilities or not.
I think that depends on the varying degree of special needs for that.
I think that really depends on the individual themselves. If they can benefit down the line from being in a different class, and distraction wise it doesn't have a negative impact on the class too much, I think that it's definitely something that should be looked at and applied. But again, it matters on at the individual and like the environment that they're in. So
I think that would depend on the individual needs of a student. Sometimes it might be more beneficial for them to receive more one-on-one attention, kind of like with anybody else who just has, like somebody might have more trouble with math, so you need a math tutor. Like I think in cases like that doesn't necessarily, their special need doesn't necessarily cause them to like need a special class unless it's like any other student who would need a tutor. But otherwise I think that they should really be in the same classes.
It depends what type of disability is. Like here we have people like in Clemson Life, but I've never been in a classroom with anybody from Clemson Life, just because I think it's set up like totally different. But people like are deaf or blind, like I know we have someone that's blind in our class. Her learning curve isn't any different from ours. She just can't view anything that's going on. So like I feel like it helps her interact with others, because she now has to interact with people. It's not like she's just sitting all alone. Like people have to interact with her just because in order for her to get her notes.
What are the costs and benefits for labeling a student as someone with a disability?
Yeah, I think that, the cost a lot of time is monetary. The costs for districts are training your staff and finding teachers who are able to work with students in that capacity. Of course, there's like the time cost element associated with that.
The cost is they're signaled out in a way. Students recognize that they're a little different. The benefit though is that I guess like they're getting more attention, more help for whatever they need.
The cost is that possibly the person with the learning disability will probably feel excluded or not feel as normal, which is bad. That's why we need like events to help have communication between people with disabilities and without. But the benefit is that they can actually have a classroom designed for them where they can actually learn and participate and won't feel left out.
I'd definitely say a benefit would be that they would get the needs that they need to be provided, and so any accommodations needed, most likely they're going to succeed more if they do know what's required of them and what special needs to be attended to. But I definitely think a cost would be that they're usually isolated from specific communities and they're not as always well accepted, and I think that's really sad.
I think a benefit might be like naming something kind of helps you to address the hindrance. So like I don't like the idea of like labeling someone as like, oh, they're disabled versus not. However, like having it known that there is a disability present can help to address it. But I think that the cost with that is like marginalization. So people thinking like, oh, I'm different or everyone else is normal and I'm not normal. Like that's a big psychological cost on top of the actual disability itself.
I mean, like, labeling someone with a disability, like, in our society has, like, a very negative connotation. So, like, all of the things that are associated with that, you know, like, teasing, like, besides, like, all those things. Positive connotation? I think probably people, like, treat you differently. Like, I know that, like, some of the students in, like, the Clemson Life program, like, they get treated, like, differently because they have, you know, some type of mental disability, but, like, not always negatively. Like, they get to do, like, cool things, I guess. So, like, it's a positive.
The costs are probably more individual for the student. Maybe their self-esteem might go down a little bit, and maybe they might be a little bit scared to participate when the other people around them are different from them, I guess, in a sense. The benefits are if they're diagnosed with something and they're given special accommodations, I think their needs can be better met, and hopefully that will help the student as an individual.
I think a benefit would be that the student might receive extra help if needed, but there's definitely a cost to it that it almost puts up barriers that wouldn't be there otherwise. I'm also thinking specifically of maybe some things that may not be like visual, like you may not see those special needs. And so like if someone's like not in a wheelchair or anything, like if it's not visible, if people are labeled with that special need, then they could come up with barriers that wouldn't normally have been there, or someone may not even know existed, and so in that case it kind of puts them up already. So I think that can definitely be a negative thing, and yeah, I think that
I think that students with special needs definitely have a stigma placed upon them, that they're not normal, that they are different. So when you place that label, both students and teachers, administrators, all see them differently and treat them differently, which isn't always fair. So.
Cons might be that they feel singled out, but I think it's a pro for everyone to recognize that this person might need more patience when you talk to them, or understanding, and have that knowledge. Having that knowledge helps. Like when you know how to deal with someone with special needs, you can work towards yourself treating them as equals.
Well, a benefit, I feel like sometimes it's a good thing to let them understand that they are different, because you don't have to view being different as something that's something you should be ashamed of, but more as something you should be proud of. Like, I didn't know until I met someone who was deaf that there's an entire deaf culture and people are proud of who they are in that culture. So I think that's a benefit of kind of accepting who you are. But again, like a con of that would be that you are singled out in a group of people who are considered normal.
It really depends. I mean, for me, I was in the 8th grade and right before I went to high school. So I knew at that point I knew I was different, but some of the good things is it helps you figure out technically there's something wrong with you, but like there's a reason why you struggle with certain things, you can't do them as well, and it's nice to have a reason behind it. Although if it's one part of you, then that's fine. Like, autism's part of me, autism's part of my brother, like it's part of us. But if it becomes the whole you, all of your identity, like if everything or all the teachers or what your parents or whatever, and that's all they talk about, or most of what they talk about, then that's a bad thing, because then you become it and you feel like that's all you are or whatever.
One thing that was surprising to me about the responses from the students in this video was that when I asked them, what does inclusion mean in regards to students with disabilities, a lot of them immediately jumped to a student with a physical disability. And that just kind of threw me off, because in class and in the reading and always what I've studied, and when I think of a student with a disability, I think of it as a mental thing and not a physical thing. Especially in regards to inclusion, because there's for a student with a physical handicap, there's, aside from what some of the students said, one of them with them in the theater, or if it's a gym class or something like that, aside from things that are physically demanding like that, there's really no reason to not include them in the normal classroom if their learning style is the same as what the other students are receiving, unless they also exhibited a degree of some sort of mental impairment. That's part of the reason why we learn about this in school, and why I'm doing this project, is because students with physical disabilities, some of them were mentioning blind students, things like that, the accommodations that are necessary for those students, I feel like those are already set in stone, and we know what works, and we know what they need, and schools know how to provide those resources. But in regards to students with disabilities, that's still something that we're learning about. I want to be an educational psychologist, so one of the big things that I'm interested in studying is, what learning processes are most beneficial for students with disabilities, what doesn't work, what does work, and obviously the reason I would be studying that is because that's something that we're still learning about, and it's something that we don't know. We don't know what the best way is for students to learn, and it really is on a student by student basis. In addition, the students reported different types of experiences for the students with disabilities. Some said that it was very, very enriching for this other student, and some said that, I think in probably perhaps the younger grades, when children are more egocentric and they aren't as understanding of the needs and feelings of others, that's when the students' experiences might be more negative, because they do feel excluded by the other students. And that's where, inclusion isn't just, inclusion by definition in the educational context means that they are included in the classroom with all of the other students. But, inclusion, it has so many definitions, and I think that in regards to students with disabilities, inclusion isn't just keeping them in the normal classroom, but it's do they feel like they are actually a part of it? And in some of these cases, the students said no. They were made fun of by other students, and others were ignorant and didn't understand. And like I said, I think that's something that you particularly see at younger ages. And then something else that I thought was interesting was that a lot of students were saying, another thing that I thought was interesting was that a lot of the people I interviewed were saying that inclusion was providing accommodations for students with special needs, which in some cases might be true, but inclusion, based on what was in the reading and what we learned in class, that's keeping the students in the classroom with everybody else, keep doing the same work, same learning. They just receive the same attention that everybody else does. And a lot of people were like, oh, well, it's giving them special programs, but that's the opposite of inclusion. That's mainstreaming. So I thought it was kind of interesting that people saw it like that. You know, as far as do I think that students should be included in the regular classroom or separated into specialized classes? You know, obviously from class notes on not only students with disabilities and inclusion, but also on tracking, you know, it was shown that, you know, there's actually no difference in having an inclusive classroom that has students of all different abilities. Students are able to learn just as well, they're able to keep up, and in some cases, even for the students who are up at the higher levels, they are still learning in the same way, if not better. So obviously inclusion has been proven to be very beneficial. It's a great thing, and I moved around a lot when I was in elementary school, so I went to a lot of different ones. But one that I went to when I was in 5th grade, so obviously I didn't go there for all of elementary school, but I thought what they did as far as inclusion programs was a pretty good way of doing it. Was they had certain classrooms that and certain teachers that were better at teaching students with special needs. And so they wouldn't be removed for a special class, they would just be in the classroom with this teacher. So in my 5th grade classroom, I actually had 3 students with a disability in my class, and all of the other 5th grade classes, or like 5 other classes, they didn't have any. And then my sister was also in the class, and she had 2 students with disabilities in her classroom. And what they do is they start these kids with the disability, and they give them the same students are in their class throughout elementary school. So these students that they're with are able to be with them from the beginning and understand what's happening. You know, the teachers obviously are equipped with the resources and the accommodations, at least you know, at this school. In some schools that's not the case, but it was a nice school. And so, you know, they would have the same kids every year, and so they really developed close relationships with these kids, so they felt like they were not only included educationally in the classroom, but they were also included socially, which is something as the student with autism in my video mentioned, you know, he said, you know, socially is where it was the hardest for me. So I think that was a really great way, because you know, if a student is having problems socially, that can interfere with their intellectual achievements. So that's definitely something that we need to look out for too. And obviously I was only in that classroom for 1 year. But they had to talk to my mom first and make sure that, because I think, thinking back on it, I think the reason that we were put in those classrooms is because my mom was actually a teacher for students with special needs. So she knew that it would be beneficial to put my sister and I in the classroom with these students. And obviously the effect was seen more with my sister because she started there in 3rd grade, so she had the students in her classroom for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and even going into middle and high school, you know, the students that were in this class together still have close relationships with the students with the disabilities, so they feel like they have a group that they're with, and they feel included, and I think that was a pretty good program. You know, the faculty member that I interviewed, John, his answers were spot on. You know, he was saying we need to, instead of accommodating only students with special needs, teachers just need to have a variety of teaching methods that accommodate all students in general, because everybody's brain is different, and everybody has a different way that they process and learn new information, and whether or not this way of processing is seen as a disability or giftedness, you know, the teacher should be equipped with a variety of ways to teach, so that all students feel like their needs are being catered to in the classroom, and everybody's more engaged and everybody is just completely immersed in the material. The student that I interviewed with autism, I actually did not know that he had autism when I asked him to be interviewed. I was just walking around the Honor Center and I ran into him and we started talking, and I had my camera and I was like, hey, I'm doing a video, do you want to be in it? And he said yes, and then he informed me of that, and so I thought it was great to have his perspective because all of the other experiences that we were hearing about were all hypothetical, like this is how I think that this student was experiencing the classroom, but his was generally this is what it was like, and this is what it was like for my brother, and so I think it was great to have that hands-on perspective in my video. And obviously his experience is different because, as he said, he is in the higher functioning end, so inclusion was probably a little bit easier to do for this student than for students who are on the lower functioning end of the autism spectrum, or with any learning or intellectual disability. A lot of students were also bringing up their experiences at Clemson or talking about the Clemson Life program, which obviously those are valid experiences and great program, but like I was really talking about, when I was asking the question, I was talking about it in like a K-12 perspective, so I value those responses, but I was kind of looking for something more about in like public schools and what we were studying in class, so it is what it is.